Does Zion Williamson need to have talked more? Would that have helped him in his career? I'll give you an answer to that question. Plus, the Thunder are getting a new arena, and we have injury updates for the Pelicans. It's a Wednesday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Wednesday, and we've got a bunch of topics to cover here on Locked On Pelicans. We're going to look at Zion and how maybe he could have managed part of his career a little bit better. Would it have helped him more to talk? Let me know what you think in the comments down below on YouTube. I also want to look at OKC, and then I just saw the Washington Wizards also getting new arenas, how that relates to the Pelicans, their quest maybe eventually for a new arena here in the Big Easy. And then we got injury updates to both Zion and Matt Ryan coming up in the third segment of today's show. I'll let you know why maybe it's not a bad time for some of this right now. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are the number one Pelicans podcast coming to y'all like nobody else is. It's been like a great 2 weeks or so here on the show as y'all have been very interested in this team. It's been a lot of fun interacting with y'all. I appreciate you making Locked On Pelicans your first listen. If you want to support the channel, be coming every day or listen Monday through Friday and comment down below on YouTube. So I'm leading with this topic because I think, Zion is still very much in the news here. And by the way, before we even get into this, this is what I'd wanted to talk about in the third segment of yesterday's show, but doing that show live, kind of forgotten the moment coming out of the break. So we'll bring it back up today. I also do want to mention Stephen A. Smith went on First Take, and the tweet was like he apologizes to Zion, which he most definitely did not do, but also basically said that he hadn't actually talked to any chef in New Orleans and that he had only heard that info from the people of New Orleans, not actual chefs or anything like that. As I said, that was completely fake from Stephen A. Smith. There you go. So I want to look at this from Zion because I think this is something that relates to you as a Pelicans fan, because there's been throughout his career a lot of just a big lack of clarity around Zion Williamson, I think is just the best way to put it, with his injuries, where his mind's at, all of those things. You remember he left the bubble under kind of mysterious circumstances back in 2020 when the NBA resumed play. There were times where it's like he's going to be reevaluated in 2 to 4 weeks, and then he's out for a season, different things like that. There was, I'm going to be ready on opening night with the foot injury. He missed the entirety of the season, all of those things. So would it have helped Zion's career? Would it have taken some of the heat off of Zion to have spoken more and been more open and honest and frankly just vulnerable, I think, with the media, with the fans? I think if you were to look at this now, if Zion were to come out and talk about, and I'm not saying he has this issue because I don't know, but say hypothetically he comes out and talks about how, conditioning is hard for him or eating healthy is hard for him, and he struggles with that, something that many people struggle with. If he said that right now, I think it would just look like excuses. I don't think that would do him any good. But talking with other media before the game on Monday, we kind of came to the agreement, it seemed like, that, and this was Will Guillory of The Athletic was involved in this conversation. I'll throw his name out there. I won't mention anyone else, but I know he's a friend of the show, and I don't think he'd have a problem with me saying this. That had Zion done a better job of just talking and getting in front of everything, you might have avoided a situation like what Stephen A. Smith did on national TV. You might have avoided some of the jokes, that I don't think are actually designed to help Zion necessarily, from Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal. But Zion never did this, right? If he had come out early on and talked about some of the mental health struggles, if there are in fact any, and I don't know, some of the other issues that he's had and just done more sit downs, whether that's with Antonio Daniels in a very friendly environment or other things, I don't think you would have gotten Stephen A. Smith saying what he said and then walking some of that back in the first place. And it would just take some of the heat, the pressure off of Zion Williamson. One of the things that I've definitely seen in my mentions on Twitter, X, and on YouTube and elsewhere, and I don't think comments, replies on Twitter, in the comments down below on YouTube are like the majority of what people think. But man, some people are brutal towards Zion. They are. Just straight up mean. And they want to be mean. They want to dogpile on him, right? Because everyone's doing it. This will be fun. I'll get my jokes off for whatever reason. Still not great for him. I think I do think Zion does a good job of tuning that out, compartmentalizing, kind of having tunnel vision. But I'm sure some of that gets back to him. It's pretty hard. If you wanted to avoid some of that in your career, if you had just been open and honest, again, the word to probably use is vulnerable, which you need to do and be in everyday life and interactions with people, I think would have avoided a lot of this, right? If he'd talked about issues with overeating and other things like that, would Stephen A. Smith have said what he said? And if he didn't say what he said, does that somehow help Zion Williamson? Again, now if he comes out and says that, I think it's going to sound like excuses after the fact. But I do think Zion could have been more forthcoming in his career, and I think that would mean that a lot of fans wouldn't have turned on him. There is a chunk of this fan base, whether it's big, little, what have you, that has completely turned on Zion Williamson from that Laker game. And I do think that Laker game was closer to an aberration than the norm from Zion. But if you look at social media, if you look at what was written locally and nationally too, about Zion, you'd have thought he was a terrible player all season long, when he hasn't. Shamit Dua of In the Know posted a great thing on Twitter, basically saying like Zion's been trending upward all season long. The data shows that. And I've been saying that on the show, that he's been playing really good basketball recently. It reminds you of how good he is playing at an all-star level recently. So he hasn't been terrible all season long, even if the defense isn't good. I just don't think he's ever going to be a good defender. That's okay. It's okay. Say that and like I'm shaking my head of like, it's not, but it is. You get what I'm saying? I do think Zion could have done more to help himself. And if he wants to try and avoid some of this stuff in the future, speaking more and being more public and having less things kind of be hidden, trying to create this facade or what have you, would be a very smart thing to do. The other way to just quiet this all down is play like you did, against the Timberwolves every single night. I don't think he was good on defense in that game. So I do think you need more from him on that side of it. He only had 5 rebounds. Wasn't a great rebounder either in that. I think some of that has to do with his size, though. So go out and play well. And all of this goes away. But, if you have an off game, it's all going to come roaring back because that's what people do when it comes to Zion Williamson. Because, look, he generates stuff. That's fine. That's great. Content, if that's what people want, put it out there. But I don't think he's done himself necessarily any favors over his career by not speaking. That season he sat out all year long, he didn't speak at all. That wasn't great. I think that probably hurt him more than helped him. So maybe now's the time to start fixing that, though I think it'll ring a little hollow at first, but over time I think could get there and be a good thing for his long-term career. So enough about Zion for a minute. Let's switch gears like entirely. Let's talk about an arena for New Orleans, because two other NBA teams are getting new arenas that I think kind of signal something that New Orleans needs to do. Let's talk about that coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about eBay Motors, because our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Let's start with Dante Exum. The Mavs are struck down with injuries, and while that's the case, Exum looks like a solid add. He was great, actually, on Tuesday night in the win over the Los Angeles Lakers. You also have Isaiah Hartenstein. With Mitchell Robinson out for 8 to 10 weeks, Hartenstein is the guy that Josh is looking for, even though Jericho Sims is starting. Hartenstein closed the game on Monday night. So Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. Same with your vehicle. I work on all of my cars. I have an old car that I'm restoring. I have a Jeep that I drive every single day. When I order parts, I do it from eBay Motors. because it's the easiest thing. Good prices and the eBay guaranteed fit. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you can make sure your ride stays running. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. You're not putting in a part, realizing it doesn't fit, you can't close the hood. Now you got to return the part, get another part, and your car's not driving. That's terrible. And at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. So keep your vehicle on the road over at ebaymotors.com. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the Number One Pelicans podcast, coming to you like nobody else does, breaking down everything you want to know about this team. If you want to support the channel, become an everyday or listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast, or just up how many days a week you listen by one. Give it a try. Get more knowledge about this team. It's going to be a fun season. I do think the Pelicans are in line to go on a winning streak, as we talked about in the show the other day. So let's switch gears. Nothing on court stuff right now. New arena. Smoothie King Center is old. It's outdated. It is. There's no doubting that. The Smoothie King Center is not a draw. I don't necessarily think you need a fancy new arena to go and enjoy a basketball game per se. But a new arena is a draw and helps with attendance. If you just want to go watch a basketball game, you can go do that wherever. That's what I look for in my experience. That said, I understand the appeal of a new arena. I'm going to be in Los Angeles, so I'm planning to go to the Saints-Rams game at SoFi Stadium. I've never seen SoFi Stadium. I'm actually genuinely excited to go, and if it was in like the LA Coliseum, something like that, I might have less of an appeal, given how the Saints have looked, to go to a game like that. But I want to check out the new arena. When I went to the Cotton Bowl for Tulane versus USC, I wanted to see AT&T Stadium in Dallas because I'd never seen it before, and it seems like an incredible thing. When you look at some of these new NBA arenas, the Chase Center, whatever the Golden State Warriors one is called, that sounds amazing, and I would like to go experience that. For a game-to-game basis, do I need that if I'm a season ticket holder? No. But if you want someone to just go to one game at your place, a tourist, whatever, having a brand new fancy arena is an important thing. These drive revenue more. And for a small market team that can't compete with teams like the Lakers and the Knicks in terms of pure revenue, anything that can give you a little bit more money is only going to be a good thing. Well, one smaller team in the Oklahoma City Thunder just had like a civic vote on something of should they build a new arena, and it was overwhelmingly yes. What that does for OKC is not only give them more revenue eventually, but it ties them to the city through 2050. We don't necessarily know too much about the future of the Pelicans. What's Gail Benson's succession plan? It's been loosely talked about, but there's no heirs there. Eventually, even if she were to pass tomorrow, and we hope that doesn't happen, knock on wood here, the team will, even if it goes into a trust, eventually the team will be sold. Eventually this team will be sold. Then what? With no new arena or long lease tying them to the city, could they move? Potentially. Did a show on this. That's why this is a really big thing. I don't love the idea of taxpayer money subsidizing a new arena, all of those things. But if it's that or the team leaves, I'm going to be voting yes. If it comes to something like that, even if the ownership should probably just pay for this themselves. So this is why it's important to look at this, because the Oklahoma City Arena is outdated, old. It's kind of a contemporary of the Smoothie King Center. They're going to get a fancy new arena, and they won't be playing in one of the worst ones in the league. The Washington Wizards, the Capital One Center, whatever it's called, arena, is old, outdated. They're moving kind of to like Arlington. They're going to be right there, or something like that, Alexandria, whatever it is, Virginia. They're going to get a new arena in a new district that they're kind of building. I just saw it was referred to as almost like a mini city. That's going to drive revenue, right? It helps them. Pelicans are going to be behind the curve, behind the eight ball when it comes to all this without a new arena. And it doesn't sound like right now there's really any traction on a new arena happening whatsoever. Not ideal for a team that has had at times a rocky tenure here. There have been threats to leave. Remember the Save Our Hornets and all of that stuff. The attendance benchmarks and all of those things. We don't want to have to go through that again. If you're a Pelicans fan, you want to know that this team is set here. I think they're set for the foreseeable future, but beyond that, I could not tell you with any certainty. And so if that ends up happening, It's not great. Obviously, I don't think losing an NBA team again for the city is a good thing. And this team will be talked about as a prime one to be relocated because, again, eventually they will get sold. There aren't, very many billionaires in Louisiana that are going to be able to afford the team, let alone keep them here, right? You're looking at someone out of the state buying them and probably wanting to move them. You can avoid that with a new arena and a very long lease. That's why there's no threat of relocation from Oklahoma City anymore because of this new arena. Not that there was in the first place, but wouldn't you like some of that peace of mind here? This is something to, I don't want to say keep an eye on because there's nothing to keep an eye on with it right now because, again, no traction. We've heard of rumored stuff, that it could be a new arena down by the riverfront. I think that would be a great idea. I don't love where the Smoothie King Center is for, 41 regular season home games. Not that it's out of the way, but there's just not a ton of stuff to do around it. You'd like restaurants, stuff like that completely next door, and that's not the case. It would be great to have a little mini district around it, bars, restaurants. It makes it more appealing for music venues and things like that when you can go immediately from having a drink or a meal to there. There are some places not far. It's still like a 10-minute walk. That feels long, though. That doesn't attract tourists from their hotels when you could make it a 5-minute walk. That's around more stuff, So it's worth keeping this in mind. But with two new teams getting new arenas that will be state-of-the-art, Pelicans are falling behind even more. That could also impact things like free agency, other stuff. Last thing you want to see is this team being at a competitive disadvantage or even more of a competitive disadvantage because of a old, outdated arena and things like that. Okay, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Would you support taxpayer funds being used to build a new arena, or are you staunchly against that? I'm actually kind of curious what y'all think. Coming up next, injury updates to Zion Williamson, Matt Ryan. There's going to be an injury. Actually, maybe not the worst timing right now. I'll explain what I mean coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Gametime because I just used Gametime. Buying tickets can be a frustrating experience. You don't know if you're going to get good seats. You don't know when the time to buy is. Are the prices going to drop? Should you pull the trigger on a deal right now? Not always fun. And are you just going to get hit with tons of fees that make it way too expensive? Gametime, you don't need to worry about that. Gametime is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You get to see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly the view that you're getting. They have all-in prices shown up front, no hidden fees or anything like that. And with the Gametime guarantee, my favorite part of this, you're always going to get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. I just bought tickets to the Saints-Rams game on Gametime. And if in that section and row, ticket prices drop even more, cool, I'll get credit 110% of difference. Just pure peace of mind buying those. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday for y'all, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, the Number One Pelicans podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Tell a friend about the show and become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday. Best thing you can do to support the channel, and also comment down below on YouTube. Couple of quick injury updates for you. Let's start with Matt Ryan. Pelicans sent out a press release after Willie Green had said in his pregame media availability that Matt Ryan was going to be out for a number of weeks. The Pelicans announced today that Matt Ryan underwent a successful arthroscopy this morning to remove loose bodies from his right elbow. The surgery was performed by Dr. David Altchek at the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York. His timetable for return to play is approximately 6 to 8 weeks. He hasn't played since November 18th. I'm not too worried about this. This is a little bit surprising because he was out with like a leg injury, lower body injury, then all of a sudden something happened at his elbow, and that's a little weird. I'm not overly worried about this despite him having had a good season because, one, he wasn't playing great defense, and two, with Trey Murphy back, I figured that his minutes were really going to start to dwindle down and that Trey Murphy would kind of take over that like wing shooter spot, but just give you better size, more defense, and all of those things. And I think that's going to end up being the case. But Matt Ryan was shooting 47%. So having him as a threat off the bench, not a bad thing. But right now, at least the Pelicans have an easy schedule, a cushy schedule. And so that I think helps. This injury potentially also means that there's more of a path for getting minutes again for rookie Jordan Hawkins. Hawkins hasn't been playing since the in-season tournament quarterfinals. Started against the Sacramento Kings, been out of the rotation, whether that's because of his defense or just because they want to run a tighter rotation. But the rookie's shooting 38.7%, 39% from three. Now you don't need to worry about Matt Ryan getting minutes over him for whatever reason. So Hawkins, should the opportunity arise, is going to be next in line if you need another shooter. I think they should be playing him at least one stint per game. But, that remains to be seen. But he will have a chance to get his number called again. We know that for a fact, just kind of given what happens to the Pelicans. So, no, Matt Ryan at least opens the door for him if you're looking for sort of a silver lining with this. And with the Pelicans having, 2-3 weeks of easy schedule coming up, at least this isn't as impactful as if it was like the meat of the schedule in a tough period of time where you're like, oh man, we really got to have this guy available and all of those things. The other somewhat surprising one is Zion Williamson is listed as questionable for this game on Wednesday against the Washington Wizards. That's who they play, or do they play Charlotte? No, they play the Wizards on Wednesday, Charlotte on Friday. Look, this is an easy 3-game road trip. At Washington, at Charlotte, at San Antonio. You can easily go 3-0. You can go 2-1. You can do that without Zion Williamson. So if he needs rest, if he needs to take a game off, miss his first game due to injury this season just to get his body a little bit healthier, this is the time to do it. And it's still time for the Pelicans to show who they are and start beating up on teams. That home win over the Minnesota Timberwolves, even if they didn't have Anthony Edwards, was a very good sign for where they need to be. Attacking and playing to their strengths and not letting the opponent dictate the game. You can do that against all three of these teams. And then you get back home, Memphis, maybe with Ja Morant back, maybe not. You go on the road to Cleveland, who's been struggling a little bit. You get Houston at home. You get Memphis at home again. You get Utah, who's been bad. And then you're at home in the final game of 2023 against the Lakers. If Zion needs to miss a game or two, if anyone needs to miss a game or two, as long as you're kind of rotating these guys through, I think the Pelicans are going to be in good position. So if there was ever a time for them to have injuries, whether it's to Matt Ryan, and again, I think the silver lining of that is, well, if you need a shooter, Hawkins is your guy, and we want to see him getting minutes. We don't agree that he should necessarily be out of the rotation. And if Zion's going to miss games, or B.I., or C.J., or Trey, or somebody, now is the time to get it out of the way, particularly on this 3-game road trip against bottom-dwelling teams. But you still got to take care of business. It'll look way worse if you lose one of those games. 2 of those games, let's say. But I think they have an opportunity to really do well on this road trip and cement a couple of things. So there you go. Injury updates. You worried about Zion long term? You worried about Matt Ryan? Do you think he should have a big role if he's healthy? Let me know in the comments down below on YouTube. And that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter. I'll be back with y'all tomorrow. This is the Tuesday show. Yep, get you set. Wednesday for... No, this is the Wednesday show. The Pelicans play tonight. I got my days confused. But we'll recap the game against the Wizards, see what we saw. We'll see if Zion plays. If not, we'll break down what we saw from the team no matter what. There you go. Got it. Got my days correct. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter. And I'll be back with you all tomorrow to recap the game. There we go. See you then.